Hello and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast for June 21st, 2024. My name is Tom Luongo and we have a lot to talk about. Now, this time we're departing from our normal format here, where it's me talking with one particular guest. And for this reason, I wanted to get this interview out and make sure that, all of my fans actually see it and hear it, and I want to make sure that this interview goes a little far and wide. So I did a roundtable discussion the other day with my friends over in Italy, Mittdolcino.com. And so we have Marco from Mittdolcino, and we have Joe Hoff, the brother of Jim Hoff, who runs Gateway Pundit. And Gateway Pundit, we know who they are and what they do, and how right now under how sincere the pressure they're under from the Biden administration at this point, which is fascinating. So I wanted to have this conversation about European banking, LIBOR, and all the things that we've been talking about on this podcast, and I've been talking about publicly for the past 2-3 years now. I wanted this conversation to get the audience that I think it really deserves, because this is an angle on what's happening geopolitically that we haven't covered in any other format or any other media at this point. So with that, without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen from Mittdolcino, and we're going to go from there. So enjoy the interview, and we'll talk later.
Benvenuti sul Mittdolcino. Io sono Kathleen Anderson. Sono molto contenta di presentarvi i nostri ospiti. Tornano infatti da noi Joe Hoff del Gateway Pundit, giornalista di fama mondiale, e Tom Luongo, anche lui una presenza regolare di nostro sito, fondatore di Gold, Goats and Guns, blog di economia e geopolitica, e anche Marco Rocco, fondatore di sito Mittdolcino, ingegnere e esperto di economia e geopolitica. Today we have an important interview with Joe, Tom, and Marco to explain the effects of the end of the LIBOR, London Interbank Offered Rate, on September 30, 2024. The consequences will be enormous for European banks and those based outside the U.S. who needs to finance in dollars. Welcome back to our program, Joe and Tom.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good. Okay, well, let's begin with this deadline and what it means for Europe and the rest of the world. Who wants to start?
I think that Tom, should start, because it has a line.
Since I'm the guy who finally put the two and two together about 3 years ago to explain why LIBOR was such a problem, I guess I get to start. So, what is LIBOR? LIBOR is the way we price dollars in offshore markets. That's what it was. What it was originally intended to do. It started in the late 1960s, became kind of the de facto dollar pricing standard around the world for the rest of the world, all the way, by the time of the mid 1980s and basically the Plaza Accord. And then after that, it literally took over the entire world in terms of how you price dollars in every market, not just offshore markets, but even domestic markets. So that, the entire time I was growing up in the United States, you had your mortgages, your car loans, your credit revolvers, your HELOCs, your adjustable rate mortgages, all indexed to LIBOR, including, like credit card rates and whatnot. But here's the problem with that, which is, of course, that it means that the Federal Reserve was not in control of its own monetary policy. And so all of the opprobrium that we've lopped on the Fed's head over the years, not saying that the Fed doesn't deserve, opprobrium. It does. It's a central bank. Me personally, I'm fundamentally, averse to and against the idea of a central bank. But if we happen to have a central bank, it should certainly serve the domestic interest of the country that it's supposed to represent and the currency that it's supposed to issue, which is not what we've been doing in the United States for the last 50 years. We've actually been serving the interests of City of London and European and Hong Kong banks far more than we've ever served our own interests. Because then what happens is that we run a deficit in the United States, we send the dollars out, they wind up in offshore banks and then are priced versus LIBOR in the open debt markets around the world. Well, if LIBOR starts to blow out because say the Fed starts to raise interest rates at home and the demand for dollars rises because people need to service their dollar-denominated debt, then LIBOR blows out to the upside, even though there's nothing wrong with the American economy, meaning that the global markets, which are far more levered up in dollars, meaning they higher gearing rates, higher multiples. If the Fed raises interest rates by 100 basis points or 1 or 2%, and they can't handle that, well, then the demand for dollars explodes. LIBOR blows out from, say, 3% or 4% to 8%. And then that gets translated back across the pond over to American, to you and me here in America going, well, why is my credit card, which was 9%, now why is it 16%? Why is my credit revolver gone from 4% to 9%? When the Fed only raised interest rates a point or two? It's because of LIBOR, because it's all indexed to LIBOR. So to solve this problem, we created the concept of SOFR back in right around the 2008 financial crisis. Actually, SOFR was a white paper at the Fed before Obama took office, except that all during the Obama administration, they did nothing about it. Why? Because the Obama administration was never working for the United States, just like the Fed wasn't, just like Janet Yellen wasn't, just like everybody else, just like City of London never was. And so this is why we're in the situation that we're in today. When Donald Trump became president, right after Brexit, right after the Brexit vote, his palm print, the sweat from his palm print on the Bible he was inaugurated on hadn't dried yet before the Fed started pushing SOFR through, because they wanted to get out from under the American banks wanted to get out from underneath this the situation and have put the Fed at the center of American monetary policy. And so SOFR took a 5-year rollout, became law of the land in the United States. All new debt in the United States since January 1st, 2022 has been indexed to SOFR. And now we're 2.5 years out from that. And the Fed has been able to raise interest rates and somehow not cut interest rates, even though by now everybody would have thought that the Fed would have cut because Europe's banks got in trouble, or were getting in trouble, and then. The way we papered over this since then has been to see an incredible manipulation of currencies, sovereign bond yields, and by foreign central banks in order to maintain this the current the currency and exchange rate regimes that we saw previous to the Fed raising rates. And that's where we are today. And now LIBOR is going away because it's no longer needed. It's no longer needed because there's no need to price offshore dollars this way, and everybody can price relative to SOFR. And when that happens, that means that, and that has officially ended, and yet it's going to trickle out for another 3 months. Once, as Marco put it, once September 30th rolls around and LIBOR is no longer being quoted on a daily basis, they're going to have to quote versus SOFR. And this is going to ensure a effectively positive carry between domestic dollars and offshore dollars in perpetuity, or at least until the two markets balance each other, which for all intents, which in market terms might as well be forever. And that, I think, is where what Marco's getting at, that that the European banks are in serious trouble because they're not going to be able to demand lower pricing for dollars than they've been getting for the past 50 years relative to their trade balances, the value, the exchange rate of the currencies and everything else. What this means ultimately is a much stronger dollar in the short term, a much weaker euro in the short term, if not long term, and potentially even the collapse of multiple European banks and or multiple European governments. The governments are already starting to collapse, as we saw over the last couple of weeks. So that's the background on where we are.
In fact, just think about this. If Europe or EU is always in trade surplus, not always, but because of Germany is in trade surplus. But you have France that is in trade deficit, huge trade deficit, and Germany big trade surplus. If in aggregate Europe is getting into trade deficit, and somebody is betting this is going to happen, very soon, before the end of the year, even slightly, okay, then in order to balance the balance of payment, you need to take money back, or you have to sell euro to buy dollar that you don't have, okay? At that stage, if you don't have LIBOR that allows you to source with say a small spread, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4%, okay, then you need to sell euro and buy dollar, okay, to pay the bills, okay? At that stage, Germany will always be in trade surplus. and we expect Germany to say, guys, I don't need you anymore. I leave. Okay, this is precisely the same situation that happened in 2011 when Mario Monti was called at the to be premier in Italy. Okay, what Mario Monti has said to have done, okay, to the CNN, he said, I have destroyed the internal demand of Italy. Why? Because destroyed the internal demand after the subprime crisis balance the EU balance of payment. Balance the trade balance, okay, of EU, because at that stage after subprime, EU was getting into trade deficit. Okay, now it's going to the market is going to ask France to do the same thing. Okay, but France doesn't want to do this kind of thing. Okay, so we are stuck in a corner. Okay, when LIBOR ends, if EU is going into trade deficit, okay, somebody has to fix it, okay, and if nobody want to fix it, for example in France, Germany will leave the euro because Germany will always be with trade surplus, okay. So that's the reason why everybody is screaming crisis in France and in Britain, okay. In France because they know that they need to do something, but they don't want to do something, okay? So they don't want to make austerity, okay? They don't want to reduce consumption. So Macron, that is a disaster as a president, need to call election to do whatever is needed, okay, to keep euro afloat. Then London is in big trouble too, because if LIBOR ends, when LIBOR ends, end of September, for the residual duration 1 to 6 months, then why staying in London for European banks, for French banks, if LIBOR doesn't exist anymore? Because LIBOR was a matter of source in dollar, okay? So it's going to be huge, okay, this change. And after the end of September, you can reasonably expect, first thing, one bank crisis. One is enough, okay, because you just need one bank, to get into crisis, and then there is a contagion. And then Germany, the logic say that Germany will tell us, oh, okay, I'm leaving euro because I don't want to pay for you, okay? Because my trade surplus is going to be used, in that case, Germany is going to say, to finance, say, the French consumption, not Italian consumption, okay? That's the point. That's precisely the point.
To that point then, Marco, the first thing that pops into my head is, then what do you do about the $1 trillion in Target 2 imbalances between Germany and the rest of Europe? I mean, if Germany wants to leave at that point, they're also going to ask everybody for their money back.
If you leave something, you cannot ask anything, okay? If somebody is leaving, then they can enforce the Target 2, because Target 2 is a kind of fake, balance, okay? But if Germany is getting out of Europe, say it's impossible they're going to ask for repayment, kind of a repayment. What's going to happen is that what I was told is that, for example, Italian people in Germany or Italian or Spanish people, they will get not Deutschmark, okay, but something different, okay. So we'll get less, okay, based on citizenship and not residency. Okay. So it's going to be some kind of small tricks in order to get as much money as they want. It's
going to be so they're going to have to take so basically the German banks will have to take a write down against their Target 2 balances based on whatever the exchange rate between the euro and say the new Deutschmark would be.
In fact, that's the point. Okay. So it's going to be a nightmare for everybody. But let's see. I think
collapse the Bundesbank.
Not really. Because bonds, I think that if Germany is getting out of euro, for Germany it's not going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for France. Okay, even it's not going to be a problem even for Italy because Italy is in a small trade surplus. Okay, check France. France is in terrible shape, and all the French banks are playing the lion roles in the LIBOR panel. Okay, so it's something that Jay Powell made, say, a fantastic job because canceling this LIBOR, okay, because he was doing this precisely since day one of its tenure at the Fed.
Yeah.
It's something crazy because it's going to crash the euro, and then we will end up with Germany allowed to have either the euro as a kind of currency similar to dollar, or or energy at a reasonable price, okay? Not both, okay? Because Germany with the euro and with the Russian gas was becoming, a kind of United States, but not having, say, the size, okay? So if the euro breaks, okay, I expect that Germany will resume the contact with Russia to get energy at a reasonable price, but without the euro, it's not going to be a problem because Deutsche Mark is going to revaluate a lot, okay? So
Right.
the competition is going to be, balanced on some extent. Today, Germany has a huge advantage because they can be both United States manipulating the currency and was allowed, okay, to have energy at a low price, okay, before the Nord Stream. That's the reason. The important thing is that we understand, especially you, Joe, because we hope everybody's hoping in Italy that Donald Trump is going to win next election. So the important thing is to support you and to help people understand what's going on, because it's going to really to be huge, because it's going to influence also policies in United States and also what's going to happen after the end of Euro. If we look in 2 years' time, so we have to establish a kind of special relationship between Italy and United States, because we are in the same boat, and Giorgia Meloni has demonstrated this a lot of time. Okay, so you are here to understand, and we are here to support you and to have your view about this, because we cannot carry on in this way, with this a kind of pseudo democracy. Okay. Just to be very honest.
Fantastic discussion. Really enjoyed what you guys both shared, and really sophisticated as well. I was in the corporate world back in 2007, 2008, overseeing a big block of business, $1 billion block of business, and at this Fortune 500 firm, and all of a sudden there was one day that we couldn't even get access to our money market accounts. There was, we thought this was cash and we'd be able to get to, and we couldn't do it one morning, and the government stepped in and made some changes so that the money market accounts would open back up and allow us to get the money we thought was very safe in these entities. So crazy things happened back then. Probably my thinking would be, I expect there's probably going to be some crazy things happening here in the next few months. We've been sitting back waiting for some sort of, bomb to go off. In 2020, we had COVID, and that changed the entire election. I mean, they used that as an example and a reason to bring in mail-in ballots, which came in the truckloads, and we believe there's a lot of irregularities that were involved in that. As a matter of fact, I've written 3 books about it on the Steel, and just lay a lot of this information out based on my background also in auditing. But so yeah, what's going to be the thing that's going to just blow up here and cause massive chaos in the U.S.? Is it going to be economic? Is it going to be this? Is it the petrodollar? I'd be interested, Tom, also in your thoughts on how that impacts all this. And also, I'm sitting here thinking, with this discussion on the petrodollar, I had actually Steve Forbes on my show one day, and he said, "Oh, I don't think the world's going to drop the U.S. dollar. They're probably going to continue with the dollar." He says, "Where else are they going to go?" And so kind of I don't have much to say about this particular topic, but we do think something's going to happen. And I'll just throw one last piece here, what you guys alluded to before we started the show. I heard this one guy on Steve Bannon's show, an economist, say, whenever the world's been in similar situations that it is in now, it usually ends up in war. So World War III is also a discussion that's on the table as well. So interested in your thoughts on how, if any of this might play out and how it will over the next few months.
I am having a hard time coming up with reasons why we aren't going to be memed into some wider form of war over the next 4 months. That's where this all is. I mean, when you do I'm not a big fan of chess analogies because it's not a two-player. This isn't a two-player game. But this is more of a classic game of something like diplomacy or whatever. You've got 5 or 6 players at the table all trying to find their edge. And at the end of the day, it coalesces down into 2 or 3 different alliances, and someone's going to stab the other guy in the back, and someone else is going to be like, no, we have to absolutely go to war here. Otherwise, we're going to get wiped off the board. And that's the position that you see Europe adopting at this point. We have to stop, listen to von der Leyen, we have to stop Putin from winning in Russia. It's all the same talking point over and over and over again. And everybody who maps to having loyalty in the United States with a foreign power, and I don't mean that foreign power to be China. It's not China. That's right now the problem. The problem is exactly what Marco just talked about. It's Europe. Europe is the one that's ready to collapse. Europe is the one that needs a cover story for that collapse. London is the one that needs a cover story for that collapse. And they want to continue their ages-old practice of colonizing the rest of the world. And they will do everything imaginable to get somebody else to fight that war for them, just like they got the United States to fight their war against Germany in World War I and in World War II. These were both wars that are no revisionist history here. These were both wars started by groups of people in Europe who refused to negotiate very negotiable terms. Does it sound like what we're doing with Russia? Is the rhetoric surrounding what we're going to do to Russia after we win in Ukraine, after Ukraine wins, does it not look exactly the same? Russia will be made to pay. They will pay reparations. They will pay to rebuild Ukraine. They will pay for their aggression. They will pay for this. They will pay for that. It's the same rhetoric that you're hearing out of von der Leyen that you heard out of Churchill. Same stuff, folks. It's the same playbook. Over and over and over again. Start a war, you can't win, get the United States to come in for you and finish that job. And then after you've won, because you think you have the massive technological and industrial advantage over your opponent, then force humiliating terms on them, break them up, steal all their wealth, and move on and move into the next century. That's their plan. In the process, they will set up a sovereign debt crisis to default on their debt, turn to the Chinese and go, you know what, we're not paying you back. We're canceling all your QSIPs, and dare the Chinese to go to war over $700 billion. That's also on the table. And you can see the playbook. That's what they're setting up. And here's the big gig. The problem is the share of the global economy as represented by the G7 is falling and falling rapidly, thanks to a sclerotic, overregulated Europe and the United States. At the same time, the BRICS are rising in terms of G7, in terms of economic power. In real terms, the Russian economy is bigger than Germany's. In real purchasing power terms, it's bigger than Germany's. The Russians are now the fourth largest economy in the world. It is mostly middle brow industrial production. Yeah, do they have high-end chips and this? No, they don't. They don't need it. China has that. They'll get there. What they need now is a rapidly rising middle class living standard, which is what they're getting. And they may get it on the back of military spending, and they may get it on the back of however you want to put it, but it's coming, and they're continuing to run a $10 billion a month trade surplus. $10 billion a month. I'll say that again, for a country supposedly with the economy of Canada, when really it's bigger than Germany's in what that money actually buys them. So $10 billion to Russia is like $45 billion to the United States. Okay? Now, for 145 million people. Okay? So when you think of it in those terms, and then you have the China, and it's clearly that India is like walking off the reservation. Iran is no slouch here. They survived ruinous sanctions. Yes, their economy is a basket case in relative terms, but it's like everything else. You can not only squeeze people so hard, and eventually they will figure out a way, and then they will start rebuilding. Iran has survived the last 12 years worth of effectively the Obama administration and the Trump administration trying to squeeze it out of the global market, and yet they're not, and yet they haven't been. So when you factor all that in together, the trends are against these people, against this situation. You have Americans and Europeans together. 70% of the populations of both countries don't want to go to war with Russia. And yet somehow we're being marched lockstep towards this. Everybody's now talking about national service and the draft and drafting women. And this is their plan. And they think they're going to get this through. But that's their only play when you look at the game board. It is literally the only play they have left. So then the question comes, how are the EU going to square all this with Viktor Orban of Hungary, the only peacenik in the entire European Council, taking over the European Council presidency on July 1st? who's going to set foreign policy for the next 6 months for the European Union. And Ursula von der Leyen won't even be able to reconvene a meeting to make a government in the EU post this election because talks fell apart last night or 2 days ago. So, I mean, they have political crisis at the top of the EU. You've got a political crisis in France where Macron, the most hated man in Europe, is going to continue to be president, even though nobody wants him to be. While Marine Le Pen takes over, his party gets wiped out in parliament, and then he's going to blame France's default on Le Pen and on the French and the victims of his policy, the French people. In the UK, we may be looking at a once in a 300-year political realignment as the Tories are completely wiped out. Nigel Farage's Reform Party steps in to be the opposition party to Keir Starmer, Labour Party, a guy no one in the UK wants either. And then we have the election in the fall, which they're clearly setting up, Joe, as you're correct. They're clearly setting up for some event in order to get them across the finish line and block Donald Trump from becoming president again. And the main reason they do not want Trump as president again is actually not really even about, at this point, about him putting anybody in jail or getting revenge against them or anything. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that it will give a clear signal to the Federal Reserve to continue to do exactly what it's been doing and to start the process of fiscal reform in the United States. Like, I don't know, doing the unbelievable thing of like maybe rolling the budget back to 2018 levels. Not even like anything real. Let's just roll the government back 5 years, right? Imagine what that would do. So you can see the situation, and you can see how unutterably desperate these people are because they have driven global politics for over 500 years. These are the same families we're talking about here. 500 years of nearly unbroken colonial rule through either directly for the first 300 or 400, and then by proxy for the last 200. By central banks and everything else. This is what's on the table. This is why they are acting the way they are.
In fact, it is precisely, it's unbelievable, but there was a study published a few months ago that demonstrated that the most important families in Florence of 1492, okay, are precisely the same families, the important family that you have now in Florence after 500 years. It's not a joke. It's clear that this is the revenge of Alexis de Tocqueville. Alexis de Tocqueville was a French guy that in the 17th century was, foreseeing America to become a world power. Why? Because America doesn't have the blood as a factor of success. It's a meritocracy. Okay. In Europe, there is no meritocracy. Okay. You cannot win. Okay. If you have a good idea, you have to share with somebody else because it's impossible to succeed. Okay. For a person that is just very good. Okay. You need support. Okay. And then you get people like Draghi, people like Gentiloni and so on. They have big family behind. Okay. The same family, they represent a colonialistic approach. Okay. That is the same as the colonial power of the last century. The same families are present in Davos. Okay, today who won the war? Okay, in Europe, France, because they have a huge mass at home, and London also because London now they have realized that after 100 years, almost 100 years, they have lost the empire. Okay. So both they are losing their colonialistic empire, and they need to reshuffle this because they don't accept United States to be at the forefront of the Western coalition. So this is completely crazy, okay? And why Italy accept this? Because Italy has Italy doesn't need to have a colonialistic approach because it's a kind of empire, a cultural empire, but people, they don't need to go abroad to live better, okay? Because Italy, Tom is American, but he has an ancestry from Italy. Okay, so Italy represents a kind of cultural empire that has been shown, with a good way of life that is absolutely totally hated by French, for example. Okay, just to name one. Okay, so now you have a coalition of good people that, including America, that doesn't want to have a war with Russia. America doesn't want any war with Russia. It's clear, okay? Instead, France and Britain and possibly somebody else, they need a war, okay? So we have to stop it, okay? Because then there might be a war, okay, for Africa, for resources that China needs, okay? Understandable, but it's totally crazy to have a war with Russia, okay? And American army, American generals, they know this, okay? They will never fight against Russia, okay? And we don't want a war with Russia. Then, okay, in the Middle East, there is a problem, okay? We have to sort it out. But we have to stop this craziness of going at war against Russia. And America is, American people, Italian people, they feel the same, okay? We don't want and we don't need this war. Instead, there is somebody else that needs this war.
Yeah, I always correct me if I'm wrong about this, Marco, but I've never been to Italy, and I am of Italian extraction all the way down the line, second generation Italian immigrant. And I've always said that I just kind of looked at the Italians and I've gone, look, we ran the world once. It was a terrible burden, and it left scars that are 2,000 years deep. And it's the problem with the Germans is that they never realize that it's terrible and that you don't actually want to rule the world. Like ruling the world sucks. And we Americans are beginning to really understand that fundamentally now. And I think the British people understand it, but the British ruling class have refused to let this go. And it's very clear. You can see it from British culture. I mean, you can see it from their cultural exports and their drama and television and whatnot. You can see it in what they export to the world. And and I think that those are very important aspects of how we approach this. There is an undeniable kind of frustrated arrogance that exists in certain parts of old colonial Europe that needs to be expunged and effectively. And I think the people have gotten it. It's the powers that be that are like, yeah, well, and to your point earlier, Marco, about the meritocracy. Why do you think it's taken so long to destroy the meritocracy? Try to destroy the meritocracy here in the United States. They've absolutely worked unbelievably overtime at this. And I'm not going to absolve the Chinese of this either. It's not just Europe. It's everyone. There is you cannot have the kinds of massive surveillance states that they have in their heads if you have a government that is still of by and for the people, which are sovereign above the government itself. It's an ideological fight against the old kings of Europe or the old oligarchies of Europe versus ideologically at its core. And that then translates into a decision about where capital originates from. Do we have the private or the public production of capital? And that's what the American banking system has finally just woken up to and said, we can't make any money off of this public private partnership. We can't do this anymore. We can't make money sending all the dollars overseas anymore. And so they're very mercenary about this, going, look, we believe in the private production of capital, and we have the Federal Reserve in our back pocket to enforce this. And we're going to enforce this. And we also, oh, by the way, sorry, Klaus, sorry, George, sorry, all you, who Rothschild, pick your poison. We have more power locally than you do. And this is, I think, the true arrogance of the way this has played out. J.P. Morgan and company made a hell of a lot more money off of the Eurodollar system than the Europeans ever did. Don't let anybody kid you. And now they get to close the loop and say, you know what, we're going to keep that capital and we're going to bring it home and we're going to rebuild the country that you've hollowed out. Jamie Dimon has been very clear on this point. Very, very clear.
Yes.
And if there is one person in America who wears two hats equally well, It's that guy, because not only does he wear the hat as the CEO of the biggest bank in the world, but he also wears the hat as one of the biggest shareholders in the New York Federal Reserve. And don't ever forget that. And its SOFR was put through the New York Bank, where the SOMA account is, where the heart of the Federal Reserve's actual power over international markets, domestic and international markets, all flow through the New York Fed. John Williams was handpicked to do exactly what he's done at the New York Fed. And he was protected all the way down the line. And if you go back and read some of the history of when he was nominated and how unbelievably over the top the Financial Times, the Telegraph, the Guardian, all the French papers, Die Welt, everybody was against John Williams becoming head of the New York Fed, because they all knew what he was going to do. And it was the New York papers that said, you know what? No, he gets to go through. You watch that. You go back and I went back and I checked that. I read a whole bunch of articles on this. So this is a very, very important, subtle point about what's happening here. And these guys aren't going to make any money off of this particular war.
Yeah, but
there's too much to be rebuilt now. There's better returns on investment building pipelines and rebuilding the bridges and all the rest of it domestically than there was, destroying Europe and rebuilding it through the Marshall Plan.
And there is one key point.
And if you have to put it in those terms, if you have to put it in those terms to reconcile why the banksters would be against this next war, it's that. Because the return on investment is better on domestically rebuilding the United States' manufacturing capability.
Yeah. Tom, I agree 100%. There is one key point that we have to emphasize. I think that it's Africa. Africa is going to be key in the future because for two reasons. One, resources. It's clear, okay? Because resources that China needs, because China is in the verge of becoming a colonialistic power because they don't have resources, okay? So they will play precisely the same game as United Kingdom and France, okay, in the 18th century, precisely the same game, because they need to buy resources at low price and sell products, okay, at higher price, creating a trade deficit, okay, financed by debt, and then blah blah blah, all the colonialistic system. But the key point is that China needs clients, because without American clients, without Western clients, China is dead, simply because they don't have enough clients to keep the manufacturing, okay, at this level of production. So to keep unemployment low. That's the reason why Italy is important for America, because Italy is a good key point an entry point for Africa, okay? So the piano Mattei that basically Meloni is presenting in Africa has been presented on behalf also of United States, because if we play the same game, Italy can do better in Africa, okay, than America, for example. Is a perfect alliance, okay? But the important thing to understand is that Africa is going to be key, because China needs to grow up a middle class in order for them to consume Chinese products. Because United States is not going to consume Chinese products anymore in the future. It's going to produce its own products, okay? So China is desperate for that. And that's the reason why they hate Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is a person that based on meritocracy first, okay? And then is terribly intelligent and it's not part of the Davos, say, field, okay? So you cannot control him, okay? So it's an interconnected world where Germany is playing the same game as France and playing the same game as Davos, and is playing the same game as China, okay? BRICS is something around it, but if you think very carefully to the BRICS country, they don't need to have to participate to the BRICS alliance for many years, because for them it's not going to be interest to have just one consumer of raw materials, okay, China, okay, and then have all the BRICS countries that then they have to buy Chinese products produced with the raw material that these BRICS countries have sold at low price to China. So they prefer a situation where today, like us today, where many countries are buying the raw materials. Okay, so to me, BRICS is not going to be a big problem. They want to join BRICS, okay? Do it, okay? Help yourself. It's just a matter of time that it's going to collapse. The point is that China needs to find clients for its products, because in China they don't need to make profit. They need to keep unemployment low, because if unemployment explodes, okay, then they are broken. Xi is going to be dead.
Yeah, let me, if you don't mind me jumping in here just on that. I lived in Hong Kong for almost a decade here, ending in 2020, and so I was there after Trump was voted in. I'm one of the few people in Hong Kong that was a Trump fan at the time, and everybody knew it. And but what I saw when Trump came in and he stood up to China and said, "Well, we're gonna get tariffs in place that we want free trade, not this what's going on now." And he stood up to him, and then China. Remember, if you recall, they kind of balked at his first offer at the last minute, and that kind of upset him. So he said, "Okay, we're going to raise these rates, these tariffs that we have in place." And I saw changes in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong benefited greatly from being right next to China and having this connection with the West. And you could see the economy slow down a bit in Hong Kong. But in China, it was really slowing down. I talked to a CEO back then, probably around 2018, and he said he was out golfing with a couple other CEOs in Beijing, and they all agreed the economy at that time was the worst they'd ever seen it in these various industries they were in. And another guy I knew who ran a plant in across the border from Hong Kong in the Guangzhou area, they were trying to build another plant. Trump came in and said to all these companies, "Move out of China. We want you to move." And so they went and tried to find a block of land down in Vietnam. They thought was the cheapest place they could get it, and they couldn't find any. It was already bought out by all these companies leaving China. They ended up building a plant in Thailand, which wasn't their first choice. So the point was that this effort that Trump said, get out of China, it was working. There were companies that were, for whatever reason, were doing that. And then you could see too, even at that time, how real estate was becoming a problem in China as well, where they overbuilt, just I believe similar to 2008 in the U.S. Too much real estate, and these loans, nobody was able to pay them off. And so that's actually, we saw Evergrande here even in the last few years just fall apart. One of the largest land I guess, or real estate companies in the world, however you want to say that. And so China has been impacted by Trump. As a matter of fact, I wrote about it in one of my books, saying if China, if they wanted to intentionally drop COVID, the rationale that they might do something like that is because Trump had economically really put a hit on their economy. And I'm not sure that it's totally recovered. I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, what I would say is the following. I get why Trump's tariffs were an extreme abreaction, in my opinion, to the decades-long worth of selling out of the U.S. previous to that by basically what amounts to globalist institutions on Capitol Hill. So it's not like we handed that money to China. Right. So it's like standing up to China. No, he stood up to his own people is really what he did. And we have to frame a lot of this differently. I'm not I know that China is an adversary, and I'm not trying to absolve China of anything that they do. They've been buying our politicians and stealing our secrets and all that stuff. And one could argue that it makes perfect sense that they would do so, because for the last 15 years, maybe longer, the U.S. has worked, and you can thank the British for this. This is the thing that really bothers me. All of this stuff originated with MI6 over Russia, which is the Magnitsky Act and all of this sanctions stuff that has turned and they seduced Washington into this ability to use sanctions in a way that they were never ever intended to be used. And they weaponized the dollar in a way that they never should have. And all the dollar institutions, which are all, by the way, signs of massive weakness. You never go nuclear unless you have to. unless you're prepared to use them. Well, we went after Switzerland in 2008, in 2010, over bank secrecy, and we threatened them with SWIFT expulsion. UBS caved because we wanted to go after Nazi money. Nonsense. We wanted to enforce KYC, AML, and all this other nascent surveillance state stuff that you're hearing out of Christine Lagarde's mouth today. It's the same policy. It's just in its embryonic form. Trump comes to power after all of this and is like, you know what? Forget it. I'm done. Raise tariffs on China, shake down the Europeans, change the friggin' flow of capital back towards the United States. Everything else, that's all just, the rest of it is details. This is about getting control of our own government and getting our government aligned with actually caring about the U.S. first. And on that perspective, from that perspective, what Trump was trying to do was absolutely correct. Lower the corporate tax rate below the OECD general level, do all of that stuff, and tax credits to bring offshore money sitting in Irish banks back home, all that stuff, like Apple sitting with $300 billion in a bank account in Ireland because they don't want to pay taxes on it. Like, this is just dumb. Money should be at home, right? So all this went on for forever and a day, and Trump's first term was exactly that. And I'll be honest with you, like, the Chinese will cut a fair deal. The reason that they're making inroads into Africa, to Marco's point, is simply because they're offering better than 1 penny on the dollar. The Chinese can go in and offer 10 cents to the Africans, and they're going to take the deal every day of the week and twice on Tuesday.
Yes.
Okay? It's still a colonialist mindset. But at the very least, now the Africans have a seat at the table, at the seat at the table of their own negotiations. Whereas in the past, with the CFA franc and all the holdovers of former European colonization, it wasn't enough to extract money, to extract uranium and gold and everything else from Niger at literally 0.1 cent on the dollar. No. We like Macron expected us to go in there and blow up Niger to enforce this. Like, dude, why don't you offer him 10 cents and just call it a day? And the truth of the matter is that the reason that France didn't do that is because France can't do that. It would blow up their finances. That's how over-leveraged they are, thanks to 75 years of the stupid Eurodollar system, where I and you, Joe, and Christine have paid for all of this. Kathleen have paid for all this. And all that money went over there for no good reason. And so, other than empire, other than seducing the United States into becoming the next version of the British Empire, same thing. And we took that hook, line, and sinker, and we ran with it. We did, and we deserve everything we get for that. But we can also, but the world will honestly forgive us if we just stop.
Yes.
And just say, okay, enough. We get it. Y'all, like, we'll never forgive the British because why should we? We'll never forgive the French because, why should we? But because they're irrelevant now. But the United States is still valuable because of what it represents to humanity, about what I said earlier about about being the experiment where people are sovereign over the government, and the rest of the world wants us to survive. And of course, the rest of the world leadership, who doesn't believe in that, who believes on the Orwellian, imagine a foot stamping on the face of humanity in perpetuity, that's what they want. And that's the world, and that's the ideological split that we're missing, that we're getting here. And China is one reflection of it, the Russians are another reflection of it. And yeah, there's cultural differences and everything else. But at the end of the day, the Russians and the Chinese will cut a deal with us. The Saudis will cut a deal. The whole story about and Joe brought this up earlier, the whole story about the petrodollar, now that I bring the Saudis up, that story about the petrodollar ending, I think that's mostly MI6 created 4chan chum. I don't think it's real. Anash Al-Haji has been running around on Twitter for the last 3 weeks going, could somebody produce this document, please? Because it all just, sprang up out of a tweet from some guy who's notorious for creating stuff out of whole cloth and getting it like thrown into the zeitgeist for everybody to talk about. And of course, it's a distraction. The dollar's not going away. You know what's going away? The euro. The euro, the reason
Wow.
that Europe is going all the way back to everything we talked about at the beginning of this show. Why is Europe so dependent upon LIBOR? Well, it's because, one, the Europeans went through a decade of negative interest rates, destroying their cap table of every bank and every central bank across the continent. That's the first thing they did. And then the second thing they did was they did that because they never expected the United States to get control of its own monetary policy. They expected to suck us dry like a bunch of locusts. And it didn't work. The Powell came in and put the kibosh on it. Trump came in and put the kibosh on it. The second thing, that the reason that they're so dependent upon LIBOR and dollars is because the euro, since the beginning of the war with Ukraine, has collapsed from nearly 30% of global non-European Union originated trade settlement to less than 13. And that happened over the first year. Now, one could argue that that was most likely the fact that they couldn't use euros to buy Russian oil and Russian gas, but then that tells you just how dominant the US dollar in trade settlement actually ever was, and that this whole idea of the euro replacing the dollar as somehow a rival reserve currency was complete and utter fantasy, only enforced by ruinous, traitorous, vandalistic policy in Washington, D.C., getting paid off by your old European oligarchs. Recycling our dollars, levering them up and sending them back and buying Elizabeth Warren with them. To make it like abundantly clear what I'm talking about. Who then goes out today, and demands that Jerome Powell implements all of Basel III, which Jamie Dimon has been screaming about, would disadvantage U.S. banks relative to European banks to the tune of 30 to 35% in terms of the amount of capital they would have to hold on their balance sheets, which is a means by which to take those over-levered, sclerotic, should be government agencies, for all intents and purposes, European banks, and make them solvent again by disadvantaging American banks relative to European banks in the ability to go out and get global capital. Basel III was something written by Europe to destroy the United States. That's what it was designed to do. And Jamie Dimon's like, no, we're not doing that. And Jerome Powell's like, yeah, we're not doing that either. And Elizabeth Warren is out there screaming that that we have to like rein in the banksters so all of her low information moron millennial voters cannot vote for Donald Trump in the fall. That's what they're setting up. I said 6 months ago, I said, if you're sick of Elizabeth Warren now, just wait till the summer. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and that's one example of what I'm talking about. But you get rid of this dollar vol washing around the world, levering up dollars and using them to buy our companies' boards and destroy all of our diamond industries like Boeing and the entertainment industry and everything else that we've done. It's all that money was sent overseas, and then all those European values got exported over here. I could go on, like tranny reading hour and all the rest of it. Where do you think that stuff came from? It didn't come from the United States. We didn't want that. It was foisted on us by a bunch of people trying to destroy us, be it the Chinese or the Europeans or the Russians or whomever. Pick your poison. I don't care. But that system has to end. And that system officially ends on September 30th when LIBOR finally sunsets and the United States the United States is the price setter for the cost of dollars. You want dollars, you pay our price for them, which is exactly the way it's supposed to be. We don't need tariffs at that point. We have SOFR. What the hell do we need tariffs for? I mean, seriously, if you really stop to think about it, yes, we have some trade imbalances, whatnot, fine. Those things will work themselves out over time as interest rates work to work out the imbalances. Maybe you have to throw some tariffs on for a little bit here or there, or at least threaten people with more of them. That's all Trump really has to do. I love the fact that he went out the other day and he said, hey, let's replace the income tax with tariffs. And we did some numbers on that. It's like 36% of income taxes of the federal government revenue comes from income taxes below, from the middle class and below. Like the rest of it comes from high-end income taxes and corporate income tax. That's where most of the money comes from. We don't need an income tax in the United States. They bankrupted us into feudalism. We don't even pay taxes anymore. So we can get rid of it. And then we can get rid of the entire industry that's set up around it, which costs us, how many billions of dollars a year do we spend in GDP to file our taxes every year? Talk about fraudulent spending.
Well, we do that in all sorts of areas within the government. Absolutely. They do this stuff and they create industries, even in our healthcare, wherever. There's all of a sudden these entities popping up because nobody can figure out what's going on with the government, and you need an agency to hire to help you, manage that relationship with the government. And they're popping up all over, income tax being part of it. Yeah.
It's truly insane when you really stop to think about all this. And by the way, all of these ideas are distinctly European and like in their technocracy. I mean, they're indistinguishable in many ways from the old USSR. Yes. Why do you think I call the EU the EU-SSR? It's like the USSR perfected in these people's minds. Like that's why they keep screaming that, like, we've never really tried real communism before. I'm like, do you not get the joke? Like, it's like right there in the face. I can do geopolitical stand-up all day. But no, this is the. I mean, I know I sound like a lunatic. I know sometimes I sound like a lunatic about this. I'm just really, really angry at how obviously dumb the whole narrative is. And we should just kind of look at it and go, yeah, why are we doing that? Like, yeah, that's a good question. We shouldn't actually do any of it.
By the way, DDR was in the EU, and one DDR person, Angela Merkel, has managed to direct, the EU for many, many years. So it's not it's not a surprise that we are where we are. Okay.
Yeah, no surprise that a Stasi agent ran the EU for God knows how long, right?
Yeah. Infiltrating United States, by the way. Anyway, we can stop. What do you think? We have to stop, Kathleen?
It's been over an hour.
We stop now. We can stay maybe a few minutes more, discussing, because we have to stay below 1 hour, okay, for translation.
No worries.
Okay.
Well, let me close off then and say thank you so much, Tom and Joe. It's been a very interesting conversation, and we've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'm sure our audience will too. You're both always welcome on our program anytime. And thank you as well, Marco, for all your support and insights. And just for the last, for Tom and Joe, where can our audience follow you or find you? Tom?
Oh, sure. You can follow me over at goldgoatsandguns.com. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728, where a far worse version of me shows up every day. And you can follow, and most of my work now shows up on my Patreon at Patreon/goldgoatsandguns, where we do a monthly newsletter, twice weekly market reports, private podcasts, private articles, and the rest of it.
Perfect. Excellent. And Joe?
Fantastic, Tom. Been an honor to be with you and the group here from Italy as well. You can reach me at joehoff.com. I put most of my material there. I'm still sharing information at the Gateway Pundit as well, one of the largest websites in the U.S., along with my twin brother there. And I'm also have a show daily, weekdays from 1 to 2 Eastern time on Frank Speech and Conservative Daily. So you can follow me there as well.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll put that in the notes.
Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 180 of the Gold Goats and Guns podcast. I want to thank Marco over at Mittdolcino for putting the roundtable with the Jim Hoft together. Marco and I have been furiously chatting behind the scenes for weeks now about what's going on within the Swiss banking system and other things that we didn't, some things we didn't even cover in this particular interview. So a great resource and a great blog over at Mittdolcino.com. And then thanks again also to Joe Hoff for taking the time to sit and listen to our insanity that we think we have uncovered here. So with that said, I'm out. As always, you can follow me on my blog over at goldgoatsandguns.com. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. And then, of course, you can sign up for the Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, where you can sign up for the monthly newsletter and or the twice weekly market reports and private podcasts and everything else. And it's where I put all of my media appearances as well, free and open to the public. So as a one-stop shop for all that. So with that said, I'm out. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. And keep your stick on the ice.